A grizzly bear saved a homeless Navy SEAL's life, but the reason it protected him stayed buried for years. A homeless Navy SEAL bought a $10 cabin everyone avoided. His dog found a bear inside. Ethan Carter had lost everything: his wife, his home, and almost his reason to keep going. With only $10 left and a loyal German shepherd named Ranger by his side, he disappeared into Montana's frozen wilderness. But inside an abandoned cabin everyone feared, Ranger discovered something impossible: a massive grizzly bear waiting in the darkness. What began as a terrifying encounter would uncover a hidden crime, a forgotten connection to Ethan's past, and a truth powerful enough to change every life on the mountain. Comment 1 if you believe animals never forget kindness, or 0 if you think this bear's behavior was pure instinct, and tell us where you're watching from. The snow began falling before dawn. Thin white flakes drifted across the windshield of an aging blue pickup truck parked beside an abandoned gas station on the outskirts of Missoula, Montana. The truck's paint was faded. Rust crawled along the wheel wells. The heater barely worked. Inside, Ethan Carter woke with a violent gasp. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. His heart pounded against his ribs. The darkness, the cold, the smell of diesel fuel, everything felt wrong. Then he saw the familiar shape lying beside him. A German shepherd lifted his head from an old blanket spread across the passenger seat. Amber eyes met Ethan's. Steady, calm, present. "Easy, Ranger," Ethan whispered. The dog immediately rested his muzzle against Ethan's arm. The pressure grounded him. Slowly, the nightmare released its grip. The same nightmare. Every night. Different details. Same ending. Gunfire. Dust. Blood. A scream he could never forget. Then Hannah. Always Hannah. Her hand slipping from his. Her voice fading. The hospital monitor going silent. 3 years had passed since cancer stole his wife. 3 years. And some mornings it still felt like yesterday. Outside, a freight train moaned somewhere in the distance. The sound echoed across the frozen valley. Ethan rubbed his eyes and looked through the windshield. Snow covered everything. The town, the roads, the mountains beyond. The world looked clean. But inside him, nothing felt clean anymore. At 42 years old, Ethan Carter had survived Afghanistan. He had survived combat. He had survived explosions, ambushes, and missions that were still classified. But he had not survived grief. Not really. After Hannah died, everything slowly unraveled. Medical bills, missed payments, the house, the savings, the future they had spent years building. Gone, piece by piece, until all that remained was an old truck, a retired military K9, and memories that refused to leave. Ranger nudged his hand again. The dog was getting older now. Gray hairs spread around his muzzle. A slight limp appeared after long walks, but his eyes remained sharp, protective, loyal. The same eyes that had watched Ethan's back overseas, the same eyes that now watched over him every night. "You hungry, partner?" Ranger's ears perked immediately. That earned a faint smile, one of the few Ethan still had. Minutes later, they sat on the tailgate sharing breakfast. A can of beans, 2 pieces of bread, a few strips of beef jerky. Not much, but enough. Snowflakes drifted lazily around them. The Bitterroot Mountains stood far to the south, their peaks hidden behind low clouds. Beautiful, cold, unforgiving. Ethan stared at them for a long time. Something about mountains always felt honest. They didn't pretend. They didn't care who you were. Rich, poor, hero, failure. The mountains treated everyone the same. A memory surfaced. Hannah standing beside a campfire years ago, smiling, laughing, her auburn hair glowing in the firelight. "Someday we should buy a cabin up there," she had said. "Middle of nowhere?" She laughed. Exactly. Back then, he thought they had forever. Forever turned out to be shorter than expected. A pickup truck pulled into the gas station parking lot. An elderly man stepped out carrying a stack of flyers. He pinned one to a community bulletin board, then drove away. Ethan almost ignored it. Almost. Something made him walk over. The paper fluttered in the wind. County tax auction abandoned properties today. 11 a.m. Hamilton County Courthouse. He stared at the flyer. A strange feeling settled inside him. Not hope. He'd forgotten what hope felt like. Maybe curiosity. Maybe desperation. Either way, it was enough. By late morning, Ethan and Ranger rolled into Hamilton. The small Montana town sat beneath towering mountains wrapped in fresh snow. Pickup trucks lined the streets. Locals bundled in heavy coats hurried between shops. Life continued. As if grief wasn't real. As if people didn't lose everything. The courthouse stood at the center of town. A red brick building weathered by more than a century of winters. Inside, the auction room buzzed with conversation. Farmers, developers, investors. Most ignored Ethan. The homeless veteran in worn boots and a faded military jacket didn't look like competition. Ranger stayed close beside him. Several people glanced nervously at the big German shepherd. One woman actually crossed to the opposite side of the room. Ranger ignored them. Professional, disciplined, always. The auction began. Properties sold quickly. Small farms, storage lots, abandoned houses. Prices climbed beyond anything Ethan could afford. He nearly left. Then the final listing appeared. The auctioneer adjusted his glasses. Property number 73. A photograph appeared. A weather-beaten cabin surrounded by forest. Snow covered the roof. One window was boarded shut. The place looked forgotten. Remote structure located in the Bitterroot Mountains. A few people chuckled. Someone near the back muttered something under his breath. The auctioneer continued. Property abandoned for nearly 20 years. More laughter. No utilities. Someone shook his head. Road access limited during winter. Another laugh. Opening bid $10. Silence. The auctioneer waited. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The room felt oddly uncomfortable. Ethan noticed people exchanging glances, as if everyone knew something. A rancher near him leaned over. "Don't waste your money." Ethan looked at him. The man appeared to be in his 70s, weathered face, white beard, kind eyes. "Why?" The rancher hesitated, then simply shrugged. "People don't stay there long." The answer raised more questions than it answered. The auctioneer repeated himself. $10. Still nothing. No bids. Not one. Ethan stared at the photo. A cabin. A roof. 4 walls. Isolation. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it was all he needed. He reached into his pocket. $10. His last $10. The final bill in his possession. He raised his hand. "I'll take it." The room went silent. The auctioneer blinked. "You are bidding $10? "Yes." A pause. "Any additional bids?" Nothing. Not a single person responded. The gavel struck. Sold. Just like that. The room immediately resumed talking. But Ethan noticed something strange. Several people were staring at him. Not with amusement. Not with pity. Something else, concern. The rancher slowly shook his head. You bought the Black Pine cabin. Ethan frowned. The what? The old cabin on Hollow Creek Ridge. The man sighed. My name's Walter Boone. Ethan. Walter glanced down at Ranger, then back at Ethan. You got family? No. Walter nodded slowly. Then maybe that's for the best. The words sent an uncomfortable chill through Ethan. Outside, the snow had grown heavier. The sky darkened. Walter followed him onto the courthouse steps. For several moments, neither spoke. Finally, Walter handed him a folded map. Road's hard to find. Why are you helping me? Walter looked toward the distant mountains. Because everybody deserves a second chance. His expression changed. But if I were you... He stopped. If you were me? The old rancher hesitated, then smiled sadly. I'd listen to that dog. Walter climbed into his truck and drove away, leaving Ethan standing alone in the snow. Ranger sat beside him, silent, watching. The map fluttered in Ethan's hands. Far south in the Bitterroot Mountains, a small red circle marked the location of the cabin. The Black Pine Cabin. A place nobody wanted. A place everyone avoided. A place he now owned. The wind howled between the buildings. Snow swirled through the empty street. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stirring beneath the grief. Not happiness. Not peace, something smaller. A reason to keep moving. He scratched behind Ranger's ears. Looks like we got ourselves a home, partner. The German shepherd stared toward the distant mountains. His ears suddenly stood upright. His body grew still, alert, focused, as though he sensed something waiting there, something neither of them could yet see. And somewhere deep within the frozen wilderness of the Bitterroot Mountains, beyond endless forests and silent ridges, a pair of unseen eyes watched the coming storm. Waiting, watching, remembering. The feeling followed Ethan Carter all the way into the mountains. Snow hammered the windshield as the pickup climbed higher into the Bitterroot Range. The narrow road twisted through dense pine forests that seemed untouched by time. Towering evergreens leaned over the trail like silent guardians, their branches heavy with fresh snow. The farther Ethan drove, the fewer signs of civilization remained. No houses, no power lines, no traffic, only wilderness. The kind of wilderness that reminded a man how small he truly was. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, unusually alert. His nose pressed against the glass. His ears twitched constantly. The old German shepherd rarely acted nervous. Years of military training had taught him discipline beyond that of most humans. Yet something about these mountains had his attention. Ethan noticed. You picking up something, buddy? Ranger didn't look away from the forest. The response unsettled him. The storm worsened as afternoon faded. Snow covered the road faster than the truck's tires could clear it. Several times Ethan thought about turning back. But back where? The truck was no home. The town wasn't home. Nothing had felt like home since Hannah died. The cabin was all he had now, his final chance. As dusk approached, the road narrowed into little more than a frozen trail winding through black timber. According to Walter Boone's map, the cabin couldn't be far. Then Ethan saw it. A weathered mailbox tilted sideways beside the road. Black Pine Ridge. The faded letters were barely visible beneath layers of snow. Beyond it, a narrow path disappeared into the forest. This must be it. The truck groaned as it climbed the final stretch. Branches scraped against the doors. Wind howled through the trees. The world seemed to darken with every yard. Then the cabin appeared. Ethan slowly pressed the brakes. For several seconds, neither he nor Ranger moved. The place looked exactly like the photograph from the auction, maybe worse. The cabin sat alone in a clearing surrounded by towering pines. Snow covered the roof. The chimney leaned slightly. One window was boarded shut. The porch sagged under years of neglect. Yet despite everything, the structure remained standing. Solid, stubborn, like it refused to surrender. Something about it reminded Ethan of himself. "Well," he whispered, "we made it." But Ranger didn't move. The dog had gone completely still, every muscle locked, every instinct focused. His gaze fixed directly on the cabin. A low rumble vibrated deep in his chest. Not a growl, a warning. Ethan immediately felt the shift. Years of combat had trained him to recognize danger before he understood it. The air felt wrong, too quiet, too heavy. The storm seemed distant now, muted, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Ethan opened the truck door. Cold air rushed inside. Ranger jumped out first. Instead of approaching the cabin, he circled Ethan protectively. His posture had changed completely. Protective, ready, watching. "What is it?" No answer came, only silence. Snow crunched beneath Ethan's boots as he approached the porch. Each step seemed louder than it should. The old wooden boards groaned beneath his weight. The front door stood slightly open, just enough to reveal darkness inside. Ethan frowned. Someone had been here, or something. His pulse quickened. He pushed the door wider. The hinges screamed. The sound echoed through the cabin. Then everything stopped. Ranger froze. Ethan froze. Inside the darkness sat a grizzly bear. For a moment, neither man nor animal moved. The bear occupied the far corner of the room near an ancient stone fireplace. Massive, easily 700 pounds, thick brown fur, broad shoulders, powerful muscles, a true mountain grizzly, the kind of animal capable of ending a life within seconds. Ethan's military instincts exploded awake. His body immediately calculated distances, escape routes, threat angles. His hand moved toward the revolver on his belt. The bear watched him. Nothing more. No growling. No aggression. No charge. Only observation. Its dark eyes seemed strangely tired, ancient almost, like the creature carried burdens of its own. Ranger stood between Ethan and the bear, yet he wasn't barking. He wasn't attacking. He wasn't even growling now. The dog simply stared, watching, studying, almost as if he recognized something. Seconds passed, then another. The storm rattled the windows. Snow swept across the roof. Still neither moved. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Easy." The word sounded ridiculous. He wasn't sure whether he was talking to Ranger, the bear, or himself. The grizzly slowly blinked, then lowered its head slightly. Not submission, not surrender, just acknowledgement. The gesture shocked him. Most wild bears would have either fled or become defensive. This one did neither. The animal simply remained where it was, exhausted, watching, waiting. Ethan slowly removed his hand from the revolver. The bear didn't react. Its eyes followed the movement calmly. A scar ran across one shoulder. Another crossed its muzzle. Old injuries. Old battles. Survivor's marks. The same kind Ethan carried beneath his shirt. Ranger took a cautious step forward. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. The bear didn't move. Ranger sniffed the air, then looked back at Ethan. The message was unmistakable. Not danger. Not yet. The tension inside the cabin slowly eased. A little, not much, but enough. Ethan carefully backed toward the doorway. Okay. His voice sounded strange. We're not doing this tonight. The bear continued watching. The same tired eyes, the same impossible calm. Outside, Ethan pulled the door shut halfway and stepped back onto the porch. Snow immediately coated his jacket. For several moments he stood there staring at the cabin, trying to process what had happened. A homeless veteran buys a cabin, finds a grizzly bear living inside, and somehow neither gets killed. The situation felt absurd, yet completely real. Ranger sat beside him, still watching the cabin, still alert. The dog seemed less frightened than concerned, as if the bear wasn't the problem, as if something else worried him more. The thought sent a chill through Ethan. Night arrived quickly. Darkness swallowed the mountains. The storm intensified. Returning to town wasn't possible. Not in this weather. Not on those roads. Which left only one option. The truck. Ethan gathered supplies and settled inside for the night. Ranger curled beside him. The cabin stood 50 yards away beneath the falling snow, a lonely shape against the darkness. One faint light glowed inside. Orange. Flickering. Ethan sat upright. His heartbeat quickened. Fire. There was fire inside. But that made no sense. The fireplace had been cold. He'd checked. No embers. No smoke. Nothing. Yet now a warm glow flickered through the window, as if someone had lit a fire after he left. Or something. Ranger saw it too. The German shepherd immediately lifted his head. His ears stood forward. Focused. Watching. Remembering. The same strange feeling returned. The feeling that they were being observed, not hunted, not threatened. Observed. The storm continued through the night. Sleep came in fragments. Every sound outside pulled Ethan awake. Every creak of the forest, every gust of wind, every shifting shadow. Shortly after midnight, a nightmare dragged him back into Afghanistan. Gunfire, explosions, screams, dust, death. He woke gasping, drenched in sweat. Ranger immediately pressed against him. The familiar weight grounded him. Slowly, reality returned. The truck, the storm, the mountains, the cabin, the bear. Outside, snow continued falling. Then Ethan noticed something. Tracks. Fresh tracks. He wiped condensation from the windshield. His breath caught. Massive paw prints circled the truck. Dozens of them. The bear had approached during the night, walked around the vehicle, examined it, studied it, yet never touched it, never damaged it, never threatened them. The tracks continued toward the forest, then disappeared into the darkness. Ethan stared at them for a long time. Questions multiplied. Why was the bear inside the cabin? Why hadn't it attacked? Why did Ranger seem fascinated by it? And why did he have the growing feeling that this mountain held secrets far stranger than an abandoned cabin? Far beyond the tree line, hidden beneath miles of snow-covered wilderness, unseen eyes watched the storm break apart. And somewhere deep in the forest, the great grizzly slowly lifted its scarred head toward the approaching dawn, as though waiting for something, or someone, to finally return. The storm passed sometime before sunrise. Ethan Carter woke to silence. True mountain silence, the kind that seemed almost sacred after a night of wind and snow. For a few moments he simply sat inside the truck, watching pale morning light spill across the frozen clearing. Everything had changed. The sky was clear. The snow sparkled like crushed diamonds. The Bitterroot Mountains stretched endlessly beneath a blanket of white. Beautiful, cold, timeless. Ranger was already awake. The German shepherd sat perfectly still, staring toward the cabin, watching, as if waiting for something. Ethan followed his gaze. The front door stood open. His stomach tightened. He was certain he had left it partially closed. Now it hung wide open. Darkness filled the doorway. The bear was nowhere in sight. "You see that too?" Ranger immediately stood. His tail remained low. Not fearful. Alert. Ready. Ethan climbed out of the truck and stretched his stiff muscles. Every joint complained. Sleeping in the pickup had reminded him how far his life had fallen. A decorated Navy SEAL, a man who once led missions across the world, now homeless, sleeping in a frozen truck beside a cabin occupied by a grizzly bear. Life had a strange sense of humor. He gathered his courage and approached the cabin again. Fresh paw prints covered the snow, large tracks. The bear had moved around the clearing during the night. But what caught his attention was something else. Smaller tracks. Deer. Several of them. The animals had wandered near the cabin, yet there were no signs of struggle, no blood, no signs of hunting, nothing. The bear had ignored them. That made no sense. Ethan stepped onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath his weight. Sunlight spilled through the open doorway. Slowly, he entered. The cabin felt different during daylight, less threatening, more lonely. Dust coated nearly every surface. An old rocking chair sat near the fireplace. A rusted lantern hung from a wall. Time seemed frozen inside. The bear was gone, at least for now. But evidence of its presence remained everywhere. Large tufts of fur, massive paw prints in the dust, a depression near the fireplace where it had clearly been sleeping. Yet despite living here for who knew how long, the animal had caused surprisingly little damage. No shattered furniture, no clawed walls, no destruction. Almost as if it respected the place. The thought felt ridiculous. Yet there it was. Ranger entered behind him. Immediately the dog began investigating, sniffing corners, checking windows, examining every inch of the cabin. Military habits never disappeared, even in retirement. Ethan smiled faintly. "You still think you're on duty?" Ranger glanced back. For a moment, Ethan could almost hear Hannah laughing. She used to say Ranger had more discipline than most people. The memory hit harder than expected. His smile vanished. The cabin suddenly felt very empty. Too empty. He moved toward the fireplace. A few pieces of old wood remained stacked nearby. Someone had arranged them neatly years ago, or perhaps recently. The thought unsettled him. Ethan built a small fire. The crackling flames brought life back into the room. Warmth spread slowly through the cabin. For the first time since buying the place, it almost felt habitable. Almost. By midday, he began cleaning, sweeping floors, removing debris, opening shutters. The work helped. Physical labor always helped. It gave his mind something to focus on besides memories. But memories found him anyway. They always did. A broken coffee mug triggered one. A faded curtain triggered another. Then came the worst one. An old wooden shelf. The sight of it brought Hannah back instantly. He remembered building bookshelves for her years ago. Weekend projects. Simple things. Happy things. Hannah loved books. Every room in their house had been filled with them. History, poetry, adventure, nature. She read constantly. Sometimes she would curl up beside him while Ranger slept at their feet. The three of them together. Safe. Whole. A life that now felt impossible. The memory struck like a blade. Suddenly the cabin disappeared. The mountains disappeared. The present disappeared. Only grief remained. Ethan sat heavily on the floor. His chest tightened. Breathing became difficult. The familiar spiral began. A PTSD episode, not triggered by war this time, triggered by loss, the worst kind, because there was no enemy to fight, no mission to complete, no solution, only absence. Ranger reacted immediately. The German Shepherd crossed the room and pressed his body firmly against Ethan. Steady pressure, grounding contact, exactly as he had been trained. Ethan closed his eyes, focused on the dog's breathing. In, out, in, out. Slowly, the panic retreated. Minutes later, he leaned his forehead against Ranger's. "Thank you." The dog remained beside him, loyal as ever. Outside, the afternoon sun drifted lower across the mountains. Shadows stretched across the clearing. The forest grew quiet. Then Ranger suddenly stood. Every muscle tightened. His ears lifted. Ethan followed his gaze toward the doorway. The bear had returned, silently, without warning. One moment the clearing was empty. The next, the massive grizzly stood near the tree line, watching. The same scarred shoulder, the same tired eyes, the same impossible calm. Neither moved. The distance between them couldn't have been more than 30 yards. Ranger remained alert, but did not bark. The bear remained cautious, but did not advance. It felt less like a confrontation, more like a meeting. Two creatures studying one another, trying to understand. The grizzly slowly sat down. Its movements were deliberate, measured, almost respectful. Ethan found himself doing something strange, something he would have laughed at a week earlier. He spoke. "You're back." The bear blinked. The wind rustled through the pines. Nothing else happened. Yet somehow the silence felt meaningful. Hours passed. The bear remained near the clearing, sometimes sitting, sometimes wandering a short distance away, always returning, always watching. As sunset painted the mountains gold and crimson, Ethan sat on the porch steps with Ranger beside him. The bear remained near the edge of the forest. 3 figures, separated by species, connected by something none of them fully understood. The scene felt surreal, but peaceful. For the first time in months, Ethan wasn't thinking about the future or the past. He wasn't thinking about debt or cancer or war. He was simply present, watching the sunset, breathing mountain air, existing. The realization surprised him. Perhaps healing didn't arrive all at once. Perhaps it arrived in moments. Small moments, barely noticeable, like sunlight breaking through clouds. As darkness settled across the clearing, the bear rose. Its massive silhouette moved toward the forest. For a moment, Ethan thought it was leaving. Instead, it disappeared into the trees. Then returned carrying something. A fish. Large, fresh. The grizzly crossed part of the clearing, dropped the fish near the edge of the porch, then stepped back. Ethan stared. Ranger stared. The bear simply waited. The offering looked absurd, impossible. Yet there it was. A wild grizzly bear had brought food, not stolen it, not defended it, shared it. The animal turned away before Ethan could react. Moments later, it vanished into the forest. Gone. Only the fish remained. The clearing felt suddenly empty. Ranger approached the fish and sniffed it carefully, then looked back at Ethan. Neither understood what had just happened, but one thing had become impossible to deny. This bear was different, very different. Night settled over Black Pine Ridge. Stars appeared overhead. The mountains glowed silver beneath moonlight. Inside the cabin, Ethan sat beside the fireplace while Ranger slept nearby. The fish cooked slowly over the flames, a simple meal, yet somehow it felt important. Outside, somewhere beyond the trees, the bear moved through the darkness, alone, just as Ethan had been alone, just as Ranger once had been before they found each other. The thought lingered. 3 broken souls, a grieving veteran, a loyal K9, and a scarred grizzly bear carrying mysteries older than any of them knew. As the fire crackled softly, Ethan stared into the flames. For the first time since Hannah's death, the silence no longer felt unbearable. And far beyond the cabin, hidden deep within the wilderness, unseen tracks wound through fresh snow toward a place neither Ethan nor Ranger had yet discovered. A place connected to the bear, a place connected to secrets, and a place Ranger would soon begin visiting when no one was watching. Winter settled over Black Pine Ridge like a living thing. Days passed beneath pale skies and drifting snow. The cabin slowly transformed from an abandoned structure into something resembling a home. Ethan repaired broken shutters. He patched gaps in the walls. He cleared snow from the roof whenever storms allowed. The work gave him purpose. Small purpose, but purpose nonetheless. For the first time in years, he woke each morning with something to do besides survive. And every morning, Ranger was gone. At first, Ethan barely noticed. The German Shepherd would disappear before sunrise and return sometime later. An hour, maybe 2. Nothing unusual. Ranger had always been independent, a working dog, a scout, a problem solver. But as the days passed, a pattern emerged. Every morning, the same time, the same direction, the same route, always into the forest north of the cabin, always alone. One morning, Ethan stood on the porch holding a cup of coffee while snow drifted lazily through the pines. Ranger sat at the edge of the clearing, watching the forest, waiting. Then the dog glanced back, almost checking to see whether Ethan was paying attention. A second later, he trotted into the trees. Gone. Ethan frowned. What's gotten into you? No answer came. Only silence. The same silence that seemed to surround every mystery on Black Pine Ridge. By afternoon, Ranger returned, tired, covered in snow, his paws muddy despite freezing temperatures, as if he had traveled much farther than Ethan realized. The next day, the same thing happened. Then again, and again. By the end of the week, Ethan's curiosity had become impossible to ignore. Something was out there. Something Ranger considered important. The question was why. The answer arrived unexpectedly. 3 days later, just before dawn. A nightmare dragged Ethan awake. He sat upright in bed, breathing hard. Afghanistan again. The same village. The same explosion. The same screams. The same guilt. For several moments he remained frozen, trying to separate memory from reality. Then he noticed something strange. The cabin was empty. Ranger was gone. Outside, moonlight reflected off fresh snow. Ethan checked his watch. 5:22. Still dark. Still hours before sunrise. Yet Ranger had already left. That wasn't normal. Not even close. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Something inside him said, "Follow." So he did. The cold hit immediately. Sharp, biting. The kind of cold that felt alive. Ranger's tracks were easy to spot. Fresh prints crossed the clearing and disappeared into the trees. Ethan followed. At first the trail seemed straightforward. North, through dense timber, across frozen ground. But after 20 minutes, the terrain became difficult. The forest thickened. The mountain climbed steadily upward. Snow reached nearly to his knees, yet Ranger had moved through it effortlessly, as if he had traveled this route many times, which disturbed Ethan more than he cared to admit. The dog had never hidden things from him before. Not important things. Another half-hour passed. The morning sky slowly brightened. Gray light filtered through the trees. Then Ethan saw it. A structure, barely visible among the pines. At first he thought it was part of the landscape. Then details emerged. Wood, metal, stone, a tower, or what remained of one. The skeleton of an old fire lookout stood atop a ridge overlooking the valley below. Most of the structure had collapsed years earlier. The upper platform leaned dangerously to one side. Broken beams littered the snow. The place looked forgotten, abandoned, dead. Yet Ranger stood beside it, waiting. The German shepherd didn't seem surprised to see Ethan. If anything, he looked disappointed, as if he had hoped to keep this place secret. What is this? Ranger walked toward the ruins, then stopped, his nose focused on something beyond the tower. Ethan followed, and immediately felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. Someone had been here recently. Fresh footprints marked the snow. Human footprints. Not old, not weathered. Fresh. Very fresh. The realization struck like electricity. Nobody should have been up here. Not in winter. Not this far from civilization. Yet the evidence was undeniable. A person had passed through recently, maybe within hours. Ethan crouched, examining the tracks. Small boots. Light weight. Not a large adult. Possibly a teenager. Possibly a woman. The trail disappeared beyond the tower, toward a narrow path descending into a rocky section of forest. Then he saw something else. An empty food can. Recently opened. Still clean. Still visible above the snow. Nearby sat another, and another. A small hidden camp. Not permanent, but active. Used. Someone was surviving up here. Alone. The realization made no sense. The mountains were dangerous enough in summer. In winter they became deadly. No sane person would choose to live here. Yet someone clearly had. Ranger approached one of the cans and sniffed it, then looked back at Ethan. The expression felt almost human, like he wanted Ethan to understand something. What have you been doing? The dog wagged his tail once. Nothing more. Ethan continued searching. The area revealed more clues. A discarded blanket, a small fire pit hidden between rocks, a length of rope, a half-buried backpack. Every discovery deepened the mystery. Someone had spent considerable time here. Someone who desperately wanted to remain unseen. Then a sound echoed through the trees, a branch snapping, far away, but unmistakable. Ethan immediately stood. Years of military training surged awake, his senses sharpened, listening, watching, scanning. The forest remained still. Nothing moved. Nothing appeared. Yet he knew what he heard. Someone was out there, watching. The same feeling returned, the feeling he first experienced at the cabin. Observation, awareness, presence. Ethan slowly turned. The ridge below stretched into miles of untouched wilderness. Snow-covered valleys, frozen streams, endless forest. A person could disappear here forever. The thought unsettled him. Ranger suddenly growled, low, soft, focused, not toward the forest, toward the tower. Ethan followed his gaze. Something moved beneath the collapsed structure. A shadow. Large. Brown. His heart skipped. The grizzly bear emerged silently from behind the ruins. For a moment, nobody moved. The bear stood perhaps 40 yards away, watching. The same tired eyes, the same scarred shoulder. But what happened next made even less sense. Ranger walked toward it. Not recklessly, not aggressively, confidently, like this wasn't their first meeting. The bear remained calm. The German shepherd stopped a few yards away. The two animals simply looked at one another. No threats, no dominance, no fear. Only recognition. Ethan stared in disbelief. How long has this been going on? Neither answered. Of course. Yet the truth felt obvious. They knew each other. Maybe not well, but enough. The bear eventually turned away, disappearing into the trees. Ranger watched it leave, then returned to Ethan. The dog looked almost reluctant, like he wanted to follow. The realization struck hard. Whatever mystery existed on this mountain involved both of them, the bear and Ranger. The connection was undeniable. By the time they returned to the cabin, snow had begun falling again. A new storm approached from the west. Dark clouds swallowed the mountain peaks. Wind pushed through the pines. The wilderness seemed restless, unsettled. Ethan sat beside the fireplace that evening, replaying everything he'd seen. The footprints, the food cans, the hidden camp, the tower, the bear, and Ranger's strange behavior. None of it fit together. Not yet. But something important was hidden somewhere beyond that ridge. Something Ranger had discovered before him. Something the bear appeared connected to. Outside, darkness consumed the mountains. Snow tapped softly against the windows. The fire crackled. Ranger slept beside the hearth, or at least pretended to. Every so often the dog would lift his head and glance toward the north-facing window, toward the hidden tower, toward the secrets buried beyond it, as if making sure they were still there, still waiting, still hidden. And somewhere far beyond the cabin, deep within the storm-covered wilderness, a frightened young girl sat alone beside a dying fire, unaware that the people hunting her were getting closer, and unaware that a retired military dog had already become her silent guardian. The storm arrived just after midnight. Wind slammed against the cabin walls with enough force to make the old structure groan. Snow swirled through the darkness. The pines bent beneath powerful gusts. Inside, Ethan Carter sat beside the fireplace reading through a worn notebook he had found hidden inside one of the cabin's drawers. Most of the pages were blank. A few contained faded notes from decades earlier. Nothing useful. Nothing that explained the strange events unfolding around Black Pine Ridge. Across the room, Ranger slept near the fire, or at least appeared to. The dog's ears twitched constantly. Even in sleep, he remained alert. Years of military service had made true rest almost impossible. In that way, Ethan understood him perfectly. The clock neared 1 in the morning when Ranger suddenly stood. Not gradually, not lazily, instantly. His head snapped toward the door. Every muscle tightened. The same reaction Ethan had seen hundreds of times overseas. Target detected. Mission activated. The dog crossed the room, stopped at the door, looked back. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Ranger whined softly. A rare sound. Then scratched once against the door. The message was clear. He wanted out. Now. Outside, the storm raged. Visibility couldn't have been more than 20 feet. No chance. Ranger scratched again, more urgently this time, then again, and again. Ethan's uneasiness returned. Something was wrong. The dog never behaved this way without reason. Finally, Ethan grabbed his coat. The moment he opened the door, Ranger bolted into the storm. Gone. vanished into swirling snow. "Ranger!" No response. The dog disappeared into the darkness. Ethan stood frozen. For several seconds he considered letting him go. Ranger always came back. Always. But something about tonight felt different. The dog wasn't exploring. He was responding. To what? Ethan didn't know. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Still no sign of Ranger. The storm worsened. Visibility shrank further. A knot formed in Ethan's stomach. The mountains were dangerous enough during daylight. At night, during a blizzard, they became deadly. Even for a trained dog, especially for an aging one. The decision became unavoidable. He grabbed his flashlight, his revolver, an emergency pack, then stepped into the storm. Snow immediately stung his face. Wind howled through the trees. The world had become a swirling white void. Ranger's tracks were already filling with fresh snow, yet they remained visible enough to follow. For now, Ethan pushed forward. The trail led north, toward the old fire lookout tower, exactly where he feared it would. The climb was brutal. Snow reached above his knees. The wind seemed determined to shove him backward. Twice he slipped. Twice he nearly turned around. But Ranger remained ahead. Somewhere. Waiting. Needing him. That thought kept him moving. After nearly 40 minutes, the ruined tower emerged from the storm, a dark shape against endless white. Ethan stopped, scanning, listening. Nothing. Then he heard it. A bark. Distant. Faint. But unmistakable. Ranger. The sound came from beyond the ridge, farther north, toward terrain Ethan had never explored. The trail continued. He followed. The mountain gradually changed. The forest grew thinner. Rock formations emerged through the snow. Narrow ravines cut across the landscape. Ancient stone outcroppings rose like broken walls from the mountainside. The area felt hidden, forgotten. Eventually, the tracks led toward a cliff face. At first, Ethan thought the trail ended there. Then he noticed something unusual. A narrow opening concealed behind hanging pine branches. A cave. Small. Almost invisible. The kind of place a person could pass 100 times without noticing. Ranger's tracks disappeared inside. So did another set. Human footprints. Fresh. Ethan's pulse quickened. The storm suddenly seemed very far away. Slowly he approached. The opening revealed darkness beyond. Then something unexpected. Firelight. Very faint. Very deep inside. Someone was there. Ethan carefully stepped forward. The cave widened after 20 feet. Then widened again. A hidden chamber opened beneath the mountain. Warm air drifted outward, and sitting beside a small fire was a teenage girl. She couldn't have been older than 16. Thin, pale, wrapped in layers of mismatched blankets and jackets. Fear filled her eyes. The moment she saw Ethan, she scrambled backward, grabbing a piece of firewood like a weapon. "Stay back!" Her voice cracked. Terrified, exhausted, desperate. Ethan immediately raised both hands. "It's okay. No!" Tears appeared instantly. "Don't come any closer. I'm not here to hurt you. You work for them. I don't even know who they are." The girl stared, trying to decide whether to believe him. Then another movement drew Ethan's attention. Something enormous shifted within the shadows behind her. His breath caught. The grizzly bear. The animal emerged slowly from the darkness. Massive, silent, protective, positioning itself between the girl and the cave entrance, between the girl and Ethan. The sight was almost impossible to process. The bear wasn't threatening her. The bear was guarding her. Ranger sat nearby, calm, comfortable, as though all of this was completely normal. "What?" Ethan stopped. The sentence never finished. Nothing about this made sense. The girl, the cave, the bear, the dog. It felt like stepping into another world. The bear watched him carefully. Its dark eyes reflected firelight. No aggression, no fear, only caution. The same caution Ethan felt. The girl slowly lowered the piece of wood. Not completely. Just enough. "You're really not with them?" "No." "How do I know?" Ethan gestured toward Ranger. "Because apparently my dog knows you." For the first time, confusion replaced fear. She looked at Ranger, then back at Ethan. "You own him?" "I thought I did." A tiny smile almost appeared. Almost. Then vanished. The girl looked exhausted, the kind of exhaustion that came from weeks of fear, maybe months. Ranger crossed the cave and sat beside her. The movement answered 100 questions at once. The dog knew her. Not recently. Not casually. Well. Very well. Ethan stared. "How long has this been going on?" The girl hesitated, then finally spoke. "He started visiting 3 weeks ago." 3 weeks. The realization hit hard. While Ethan believed Ranger was exploring the mountains, the dog had been coming here, repeatedly, secretly, bringing comfort to someone hiding from the world, the same way he had once comforted Ethan. He brought food. The girl reached toward a pile of supplies near the fire. Canned soup, jerky, bottled water. Most looked familiar. Painfully familiar. They came from Ethan's own supplies. Ranger had been stealing food. Not for himself, for her. The old dog lowered his head slightly. Almost guilty. Ethan couldn't decide whether to laugh or cry. "You've been running a rescue operation behind my back." Ranger's tail thumped once. The girl finally smiled. A small one, but real. Then her expression darkened. "They're still looking for me." The words immediately changed everything. The warmth disappeared. The mystery deepened. "Who?" The girl stared into the fire. For several seconds she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice barely rose above a whisper. "People who don't want me talking." Outside, the storm intensified. Wind roared through the mountains. Snow hammered the cave entrance. Inside, 4 lives sat together beside a small fire. A grieving veteran, a loyal military dog, a frightened teenage girl, and a grizzly bear that should have been her greatest threat, but had somehow become her protector. Ethan looked at the girl carefully. "What's your name?" She hesitated, then answered, "Ava." The fire crackled softly. The bear settled beside her, protective, watchful, family. And for the first time since arriving on Black Pine Ridge, Ethan realized the mystery was far bigger than a strange bear, far bigger than an abandoned cabin. Someone had driven a teenage girl into hiding, someone dangerous, someone powerful enough to make her choose a cave in the middle of winter over returning home. And somewhere beyond the storm-covered mountains, those people were still searching, getting closer with every passing day. The storm continued through the night. Snow piled high outside the cave entrance, sealing the wilderness beneath a blanket of white silence. Inside, the small fire cast flickering shadows against the stone walls. Nobody slept much. Ava sat wrapped in blankets near the flames. The grizzly rested nearby, her enormous body partially blocking the cave entrance. Ranger lay between Ethan and the girl, as if protecting both. The sight should have felt impossible. Yet somehow it no longer did. The mountains had a way of changing what seemed normal. Ethan sat quietly, studying Ava. The teenager looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath her eyes. Fear had become a permanent part of her expression. The kind of fear that didn't come from imagination. The kind that came from experience. Eventually, Ethan broke the silence. "How long have you been up here?" Ava stared into the fire. "Almost 2 months." The answer stunned him. 2 months, alone, in the mountains, through winter. It shouldn't have been possible. Yet here she sat, alive, barely. Ethan glanced toward the bear. Pieces of the puzzle slowly began fitting together. "You survived because of her." Ava followed his gaze. The teenager's expression softened. "Partly." The bear lifted her head slightly, watching them, listening. Ava smiled faintly. "I call her Shadow." Ethan blinked. "You named a grizzly bear?" She needed a name. The answer was simple, honest. The kind of answer only a teenager could give. For a moment, Ethan almost laughed. Then the smile vanished from Ava's face. The fear returned. Shadow seemed to notice immediately. The bear shifted closer, protective, comforting, almost maternal. The gesture wasn't lost on Ethan. "What happened, Ava?" The fire crackled softly. Outside, wind rattled the cave entrance. For several seconds, she remained silent. Then she finally spoke. "My dad worked for Victor Hale." The name meant nothing to Ethan. Yet the reaction it triggered in Ava told him everything. Fear, anger, pain. Victor Hale mattered. A lot. He owned half the businesses around Hamilton. Ava continued. Construction companies, land development, mining contracts. She swallowed hard. Everyone thought he was successful. And? Ava looked away. Successful people don't usually bury bodies. The cave fell silent. Even the wind seemed to disappear. Ethan stared at her, certain he had heard correctly. "Explain." Ava took a shaky breath. The memory clearly hurt, but she forced herself forward. "My dad was a surveyor." She paused. "He worked on one of Hale's land projects." Ethan listened carefully. Every word mattered. "About 3 months ago, Dad found something wrong in the records." "What kind of wrong?" "The ownership documents." Her voice grew stronger. The land didn't belong to Victor Hale. Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "He bought it using fake records." The statement hung heavily in the air. Ava continued. "He stole land from ranching families decades ago." A familiar theme echoed through Ethan's mind. Land. Ownership. Power. Money. The oldest battles in America. My father found proof. Ava's hands trembled slightly. He planned to expose everything. The fire popped, sending sparks upward. Then came the part she clearly dreaded. He met Victor Hale near an old survey site. Tears appeared instantly. I followed him. Ethan remained silent, letting her speak. "He didn't know I was there." Her voice cracked. "I saw everything." The words barely escaped. "Victor killed him." Silence. Complete silence. Ava stared into the flames, lost somewhere inside the memory. Ethan felt anger rising. Slow, controlled, dangerous. The kind of anger military training taught men to hide, not because it disappeared, because it became useful. What happened after? Ava wiped her eyes. "I ran." The answer sounded simple, but Ethan knew better. Running had cost her everything. My dad always told me if something happened, trust nobody connected to Hale. She laughed bitterly. Turns out that's most of the town. The statement carried painful truth. Powerful men rarely operated alone, especially in small communities. They started looking for me. She glanced toward the cave entrance. I heard them talking. Who? Hale's men? The fear returned instantly. They knew I saw something. Ethan nodded slowly. Of course. A witness. That explained everything. The mountains weren't hiding a runaway. They were hiding evidence. Living evidence. Ranger suddenly lifted his head. The dog walked toward Ava, then gently rested his muzzle on her knee. The girl's expression softened immediately. Ethan watched the interaction carefully. Tell me about Ranger. Ava smiled. A genuine smile this time. He found me. The answer didn't surprise him. Not anymore. I was starving. Her voice grew quieter. I hadn't eaten in 2 days. She scratched behind Ranger's ears. The old shepherd closed his eyes. Content. He showed up one morning carrying jerky. Ethan groaned softly. So that's where it went. For the first time, Ava laughed. The sound transformed the cave, briefly, beautifully. Then she continued. He kept coming back. Ranger thumped his tail. He brought food. Another thump. Blankets. Another. Even Ethan stared. What? Ava pointed toward several blankets near the cave wall. Ethan recognized them immediately. They belonged to the cabin. Ranger had been stealing supplies, organizing rescue missions, running logistics, without permission, without recognition, without complaint, exactly like a soldier. The realization struck him hard. The dog had been protecting someone long before Ethan understood the mission existed. Tears unexpectedly filled his eyes, not from sadness, from pride. Hannah would have loved you. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The cave grew quiet. Ranger looked at him, the same way he always did whenever Hannah's name appeared. The dog remembered too. Years had passed, yet neither of them had truly moved on. Shadow suddenly rose. The massive bear moved toward the cave entrance, alert, focused, every instinct awake. Immediately, Ranger stood. The shift happened so fast, Ethan's pulse spiked. What is it? The bear stared into the darkness, listening. The storm had weakened. Wind no longer drowned the outside world. Then Ethan heard it. Faint, very distant. An engine. The sound echoed somewhere beyond the mountains. Small, almost impossible to detect. But real. Ava's face immediately drained of color. No. The word escaped like a whisper. No. 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 Ethan looked at her. What? They're searching again. Fear consumed her, raw, immediate, unmistakable. Shadow rumbled softly. The sound vibrated through the cave. Protective. Warning. The bear knew too. The engine faded, then disappeared. But the damage was done. The reminder remained. The threat remained. The hunters remained. Hours later, after dawn finally arrived, the storm began clearing. Pale sunlight filtered through the cave entrance. The mountains glittered beneath fresh snow. Beautiful. Peaceful. Deceptive. Ethan stepped outside. Ranger followed. The cold air helped him think. Everything had changed. The mystery was gone. Now there was a problem. A real one. a teenager hiding from powerful people, a witness to murder, a corrupt land developer, and a mountain full of secrets. He looked back toward the cave. Ava sat beside the bear. The girl and the grizzly looked oddly similar. Both survivors, both hunted, both carrying wounds invisible to most people. Ranger moved between them effortlessly, loyal to everyone, protecting everyone. The same way he had always protected Ethan. The old soldier's chest tightened. For the first time since Hannah's death, someone needed him again. Not for combat, not for war, for protection, for safety, for hope. The feeling felt unfamiliar, yet strangely welcome. Inside the cave, Ava looked up. Their eyes met. "You're leaving?" Ethan considered the question, then slowly shook his head. "No." The answer surprised even him, but it felt right. "I don't think I am." Outside, the mountains stretched endlessly beneath the morning sun. Far beyond the ridges and forests, hidden behind wealth and influence, Victor Hale continued living his life, confident, untouchable, certain that his secrets remained buried. But he didn't know something important. A witness was still alive. A retired Navy SEAL had entered the story, and a loyal military dog had already chosen which side he was fighting for. The ride back to Black Pine Cabin felt different. The mountains hadn't changed. The snow hadn't changed. The bitter winter wind still swept across the ridges and through the pines. Yet everything felt heavier now. Before meeting Ava, Ethan Carter believed he had simply purchased an abandoned cabin, a strange place, a lonely place, a place to disappear. Now he understood something else. The mountain was hiding secrets, dangerous secrets, and somehow those secrets were connected to him. Ranger trotted ahead along the narrow trail. The German shepherd seemed lighter than usual, almost relieved, as though introducing Ethan to Ava had completed part of a mission he had been carrying alone. Behind them, Shadow followed silently. The massive grizzly moved through the forest with surprising grace, never too close, never too far. A guardian keeping watch. By the time Ethan reached the cabin, the sun was already falling behind the western peaks. Long shadows stretched across the snow. The sky glowed orange and purple. Montana looked beautiful enough to belong in a painting. But Ethan's mind remained focused on Ava's story. Victor Hale. Murder. Land fraud. A witness hiding in a cave. Nothing about it felt small. Inside the cabin, Ranger immediately began pacing. Not nervous. Focused. Purposeful. The dog moved from room to room, sniffing, checking, investigating. Ethan watched him curiously. "You know something, don't you?" Ranger stopped near the fireplace, then walked toward the far corner of the cabin, a section of floorboards, the same place he had examined repeatedly over the past week. The dog scratched once, then twice. Ethan frowned. "What is it?" Ranger scratched again, harder this time. The sound echoed through the room. Something about the dog's persistence felt unusual, almost urgent. Ethan grabbed a flashlight, knelt beside the floor, examined the boards carefully. At first he saw nothing. Then he noticed a tiny gap. One board sat slightly higher than the others, almost invisible. Most people would never have noticed. But Ranger had. The old dog scratched again. Ethan smiled faintly. "All right, Sergeant. Let's see what you've got." Using a pry bar from his toolkit, he carefully lifted the board. The wood resisted, then suddenly popped free. Dust rose into the air. Below lay darkness. A hidden compartment. Ethan froze. Slowly he aimed the flashlight downward. His pulse quickened. Inside rested a metal box. Old, rust-covered, heavy. The kind of box people use to hide things they never wanted discovered. For several seconds, he simply stared. The cabin suddenly felt very quiet. Ranger sat beside him, watching, waiting, as if he already knew what was inside. Ethan lifted the box carefully. The hinges groaned when he opened it. Inside were dozens of documents. Maps, property records, photographs, letters, some dating back decades. The paper had yellowed with age, yet most remained readable. Ethan carried everything to the table near the fireplace. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly while snow drifted outside. Ranger remained beside him the entire time, patient, silent, watching him piece together the truth. At first, the documents seemed random. Land surveys, boundary maps, ownership certificates, old tax records. But gradually, a pattern emerged. A disturbing one. Nearly every document involved the same area. Black Pine Ridge, the surrounding mountains, the valleys below. And one name appeared repeatedly. Hale. Not Victor Hale. His father. Then his grandfather. Generation after generation. The deeper Ethan looked, the worse it became. Entire ranches had changed ownership under suspicious circumstances. Families vanished from records. Signatures appeared inconsistent. Property lines mysteriously shifted. Small parcels became massive holdings. A fortune built piece by piece, not through hard work, through manipulation. The realization settled heavily over him. Victor Hale hadn't created the fraud. He had inherited it, expanded it, protected it. The mountain itself was evidence. Then Ethan found the map, folded carefully beneath the others, a large survey map covering the entire region. Unlike the other documents, this one contained handwritten notes, coordinates, measurements, mineral indicators. Ethan studied it closely. His military training taught him to recognize patterns. The markings formed a clear outline. A deposit. Large. Very large. Mining potential. Suddenly, everything made sense. Victor Hale wasn't simply protecting old fraud. He was protecting future wealth. Millions of dollars, maybe far more. The cabin sat directly above part of the deposit, a critical section. Without ownership of Black Pine Ridge, his plans would never be complete. Ethan leaned back slowly. The room felt smaller. The stakes felt larger. The worthless $10 cabin had just become the most valuable piece of property in the region. No wonder nobody wanted it. No wonder people acted strangely at the auction. Somebody knew. Maybe not everything, but enough. Outside, darkness swallowed the mountains. The fire burned low. Hours passed. Then a sound interrupted the silence. An engine. Distant. Very distant. But real. Ethan immediately extinguished the lantern. The cabin plunged into darkness. Ranger rose instantly. Every instinct engaged. The engine grew louder. Headlights appeared through the trees. 2 vehicles, moving slowly along the old road. Ethan crouched beside the window, watching. A black pickup. Then another. The trucks stopped near the edge of the clearing. The engines remained running. For several moments, nobody emerged. Then doors opened. 3 men stepped into the snow. Heavy coats, flashlights, confident movements. Not tourists, not hunters. The men spread out, scanning the property, searching. Ranger released a low growl. Ethan placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. Easy. The men never approached the cabin. Instead, they walked the perimeter, studying, observing. Then one of them pointed toward the roof. Another examined the truck. The third stared directly at the cabin window. For one uncomfortable moment, Ethan thought he had been spotted. Then the man turned away. 10 minutes later, the vehicles departed. The headlights disappeared into the darkness. Silence returned, but the message remained. Victor Hale's people had found the cabin. Maybe they were checking ownership records. Maybe they were searching for Ava. Maybe both. Either way, the danger had arrived. The mountain no longer belonged solely to Ethan. Other players had entered the game, and they were looking for something, or someone. The next morning, Ethan loaded several documents into his backpack. Not all of them, just enough. The originals remained hidden beneath new floorboards. He trusted Ranger, but he trusted caution more. Outside, fresh snow covered the tracks from the previous night. The mountain looked innocent again, as if nothing had happened, as if no secrets existed beneath the cabin, as if no witness hid in a cave, as if no corrupt empire rested upon stolen land. The illusion almost worked. Almost. Then Ranger barked, sharp, alert. Ethan turned. The German shepherd stood facing the road, watching, listening, waiting. Far beyond the trees, another vehicle engine echoed through the mountains. Closer this time. Much closer. And for the first time since arriving on Black Pine Ridge, Ethan realized something important. Victor Hale wasn't simply searching. He was closing in. The feeling settled over Ethan Carter like a gathering storm. For weeks, Black Pine Ridge had felt isolated from the rest of the world. Now it felt exposed. Every tree seemed to hide eyes. Every distant engine sounded like a warning. Every shadow carried possibility. Danger had finally found the mountain, and danger rarely arrived alone. The morning after the vehicles appeared near the cabin, Ethan drove into Hamilton for the first time since meeting Ava. The small Montana town looked peaceful beneath fresh snow. Church steeples rose above the rooftops. Smoke drifted from chimneys. Families crossed icy sidewalks carrying groceries and coffee. On the surface, everything appeared normal. But Ethan had spent enough years operating in hostile environments to know appearances meant very little. Sometimes the safest-looking places hid the darkest secrets. Ranger sat quietly in the passenger seat. His eyes constantly scanned the streets, watching, evaluating, working. Old habits never disappeared. The dog noticed things most people missed. So did Ethan. And what he noticed bothered him. Victor Hale's name was everywhere. Construction signs, business advertisements, billboards, community projects, a new medical clinic, a housing development. Even the town library carried a plaque thanking Hale Industries for generous donations. The man had built influence the way others built fences. Everywhere. Permanent. Difficult to challenge. Ethan stopped at a diner near Main Street. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon filled the warm air. Several older ranchers sat near the windows discussing weather forecasts. Nobody paid much attention to Ethan, until they noticed Ranger. Then the conversation stopped. People smiled, veterans especially. Dogs like Ranger earned respect without asking for it. The waitress approached. "Beautiful shepherd. He thinks so too." The woman laughed, then lowered her voice slightly. "You staying up at Black Pine?" Ethan's attention sharpened immediately. "How'd you know, Mo?" "News travels." The answer came too quickly, too casually. The waitress glanced toward the window, then toward another table. A man sitting alone. Heavy coat. Expensive watch. Watching. Not eating. Not reading. Watching. The moment their eyes met, the stranger looked away. Ethan felt the warning instantly. The waitress leaned closer. People asked questions about newcomers. What kind of people? She hesitated, then answered quietly. The kind you don't want asking. The conversation ended there. Neither said another word. They didn't need to. The message had been delivered. By the time Ethan left town, he knew one thing for certain. Victor Hale already knew about him. The drive back felt longer. The mountains darker. The silence heavier. Snow began falling again shortly after noon. Nothing serious. Just enough to blur visibility. Enough to hide movement. Enough to hide people. When Ethan finally reached the cabin, Ranger jumped from the truck before it fully stopped. Immediately alert. Immediately focused. The dog ran a quick perimeter check, then stopped. Growling. Low. Controlled. Danger. Ethan followed. Fresh tire tracks crossed the property. Not his. Not old. Recent. Very recent. Someone had visited while he was gone. The realization tightened every muscle in his body. The cabin door remained closed. Nothing appeared damaged. Yet the message was obvious. Someone knew where he lived. Someone wanted him to know. Inside, everything looked normal, at first. Then Ethan noticed subtle changes. A chair slightly moved, a drawer not fully closed, the kitchen window unlocked. Tiny details, but details mattered. Especially to men trained to survive. Someone had entered. Someone had searched. Ranger sniffed the floor repeatedly, then stopped near the fireplace, the hidden compartment. Ethan's pulse quickened. He immediately removed the loose board. The metal box remained there, untouched, at least physically. Still, the realization chilled him. The searchers hadn't found what they wanted. Not yet. Which meant they would return. That evening, Ethan made a decision. For the first time since leaving military service, he began preparing defensive positions. Not traps, not weapons, just precautions. Observation points, warning systems, simple measures designed to buy time. Time saved lives. He knew that better than most. Ranger assisted eagerly, moving beside him through the snow, checking routes, memorizing paths, working like the military K-9 he had once been. The process felt strangely familiar, almost comforting. Purpose returned. Focus returned. The parts of Ethan he thought had died after Hannah's death slowly awakened. Not the warrior, the protector. The difference mattered. Night arrived early. Clouds swallowed the moon. The forest disappeared into darkness. Inside the cabin, Ethan reviewed maps while Ranger rested near the door. The old dog never truly slept anymore. Not when danger approached. Not when people he loved needed protection. Hours passed. The fire crackled softly. Wind whispered through the trees. Then Ranger's head lifted, instantly. Every muscle tightened. Ethan looked up. The dog moved toward the window, silent, focused. Outside, darkness remained absolute. Nothing visible. Yet Ranger knew. Someone was there. A minute later, Ethan heard it too. Footsteps. Very faint. Moving through snow. Several people. Not one. Not two. More. The cabin suddenly felt very small. The footsteps stopped. Silence followed. Long. Uncomfortable. Then another sound. Metal striking metal. Somewhere near the truck. Ethan moved carefully toward the window. A flashlight beam appeared briefly, then vanished. Another. Then another. 3 men. Maybe 4. Moving around the property. Searching. Watching. Testing. Ranger released a low growl. The sound barely escaped his throat. Professional. Controlled. Ethan placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. Not yet. The men remained outside, never approaching the cabin directly, never knocking, never speaking, just circling, studying, sending a message. Nearly 30 minutes passed before they finally left. Vehicle engines started. Headlights flashed between the trees, then disappeared. Silence returned once more, but sleep never did. The next morning revealed the full extent of the visit. Truck tires slashed, fuel line damaged, supplies missing from the storage shed. Nothing devastating, nothing impossible to replace. Just enough. A warning. A demonstration. Victor Hale's people wanted Ethan uncomfortable, afraid, willing to leave. Instead, the opposite happened. The old Navy SEAL stared at the damage for several minutes, then smiled, not because he enjoyed conflict, because he understood it. Fear worked on people who wanted comfort. Ethan Carter had already lost everything comfort once gave him. Fear held very little power anymore. Ranger barked suddenly, sharp, urgent. The dog sprinted toward the tree line. Ethan followed. Several hundred yards beyond the cabin, hidden among the pines, they found something unexpected. A small observation point, fresh footprints, food wrappers, binocular marks in the snow. Someone had been watching the cabin for days, maybe longer, watching Ethan, watching Ranger, possibly watching Ava. The realization carried enormous weight. The mountain no longer belonged to them. The enemy had moved closer, much closer. As evening approached, Ethan stood outside the cabin watching darkness descend over Black Pine Ridge. Far away, beyond endless forests and snow-covered valleys, Ava remained hidden inside her cave. Safe for now, Shadow remained with her. Ranger would insist on checking on her tomorrow. That much Ethan already knew. But another realization troubled him. Victor Hale's men weren't acting like searchers anymore. They were acting like hunters, and hunters rarely stop after finding tracks. They keep moving forward, until they find their target. The storm arrived at dusk, not a normal winter storm, not the kind that drifted quietly through the mountains. This one felt angry. Heavy clouds swallowed the sky. The temperature dropped sharply. Wind tore through Black Pine Ridge with a mournful howl that echoed between the peaks. Ethan Carter stood on the cabin porch watching darkness consume the forest. Something felt wrong. The feeling had followed him all day. A pressure in his chest. A warning buried deep within instincts he had trusted his entire life. Ranger felt it too. The German shepherd paced constantly, checking windows, checking doors, checking the tree line. Working. Always working. Inside the cabin, Ava sat near the fireplace wrapped in blankets. 3 days earlier, Ethan had finally convinced her to leave the cave temporarily. The mountain was becoming too dangerous. Too many people were searching. Too many questions were being asked. Shadow had remained close. The grizzly spent most evenings near the clearing, never entering the cabin, but never wandering far away. Protecting. Watching. Waiting. A strange family had formed on Black Pine Ridge. A veteran, a teenage girl, a retired military dog, and a grizzly bear. The world would never believe it, yet somehow it worked. A sudden bark shattered the silence. Ranger froze near the window. His ears locked forward. His body became rigid. Target acquired. Ethan immediately moved beside him. The forest looked empty, dark, still. Then he saw it. A light, far beyond the trees. Then another. Then another. Flashlights, moving through the snow. Multiple people. Approaching. The moment had arrived. Victor Hale's men were no longer watching. They were coming. "Get away from the windows," Ethan said. Ava immediately obeyed. Fear filled her face. She already knew who it was. Outside, the lights moved closer. Slowly, methodically. The confidence bothered Ethan more than anything. These weren't random trespassers. These were men who believed they controlled the situation. The old Navy SEAL moved calmly through the cabin. Years of training returned. Not aggression. Preparation. The difference mattered. He checked every entrance, every blind spot, every possible route. Ranger remained beside him, focused, silent, ready. The first voice echoed from outside. "Ethan Carter!" The wind carried the words through the darkness. A male voice, confident, cold. "We just want to talk." Ethan almost laughed. Men carrying flashlights through a mountain storm at night rarely came for conversation. The voice continued. "You've gotten involved in something that doesn't concern you." Ava's face went pale. She recognized the speaker. Ethan saw it immediately. "They found me." The words barely escaped her lips. Outside, more lights appeared. 4, 5, maybe 6, moving between the trees, encircling the property. The situation worsened by the second. Then Ranger growled, not toward the front, toward the rear. Ethan turned. Movement, a shadow crossing behind the cabin. Someone was trying to approach unseen. The old soldier's pulse remained steady. Years ago, this moment would have felt familiar. Now it felt personal. The people inside the cabin weren't clients, or teammates, or strangers. They were his responsibility. Outside, the voice spoke again. "Victor Hale is willing to be generous." Ethan shook his head. "Always money. People like Hale always believed everything had a price." The voice continued. "Give us the girl and the documents." Silence followed. Then Ethan answered, "No." The single word disappeared into the storm, but everyone heard it. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then a loud crack echoed through the forest. A tree branch snapping, a warning, not an attack. Yet. Ranger barked sharply. The dog moved toward the rear window, his instincts screaming. Ethan followed. A dark figure crouched near the shed, watching, waiting. The man realized he had been spotted, then vanished into the snow. The standoff continued. Minutes passed. The storm intensified. Visibility dropped. The mountains disappeared beneath white chaos. Then shadow emerged. The grizzly stepped from the tree line. Massive, silent, powerful. The men outside saw her immediately. Several flashlights swung toward her. The bear stopped, watching them. Not threatening, not retreating. The appearance changed everything. The voices stopped. Even Victor Hale's men understood what stood before them. For a moment, nobody moved. Human, dog, bear, storm. Silence. Then one of the men panicked. A loud sound shattered the night. Not aimed at anyone, not directed toward the cabin. A warning shot into the air. The sound exploded across the mountains. Shadow reared backward. Ranger barked furiously. Ava screamed, and Ethan felt something inside him break loose. Not fear, memory. Suddenly the storm vanished. The cabin vanished. The mountain vanished. Another place appeared. Another night. Another firefight. Another explosion. Afghanistan. The PTSD hit like a freight train. His breathing accelerated. His vision narrowed. The old nightmare returned. For several terrifying seconds, Ethan wasn't standing inside a cabin. He was back in combat. Back among ghosts. Back among losses he never escaped. Ranger reacted immediately. The dog rushed to him, pressed hard against his leg, grounding, anchoring, pulling him back. The technique had saved Ethan dozens of times. Tonight, it saved him again. Slowly, reality returned. The cabin, the storm, Ava, Shadow, the men outside. Present, not past. Ethan forced air into his lungs, focused, recovered. Outside, engines suddenly roared. More vehicles. Additional men arriving. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Then everything happened at once. Flashlights surged forward. Voices shouted through the storm. Movement exploded around the property. Chaos, confusion, danger. Ranger sprinted toward the front window, then stopped, instantly. His ears locked onto something Ethan couldn't yet hear. The dog turned, looked directly at him, a warning, a desperate one. Then Ranger launched himself sideways. A split second later, something crashed through the cabin wall. Wood exploded, glass shattered. The room erupted into chaos. Ava screamed. Dust filled the air. Ethan hit the floor instinctively. For several seconds, nobody understood what had happened. Then he saw Ranger. The German Shepherd lay several feet away, motionless. The dog had thrown himself into Ethan's path, protecting him. The way he always had. The way he always would. Ethan. Ava's voice trembled. He barely heard her. His entire world narrowed to one thing, Ranger. The old dog struggled to move. Pain filled his eyes. Yet even now his attention remained focused on Ethan, making sure he was alive, making sure his mission succeeded. The sight shattered something deep inside the former SEAL. Fear, unlike anything he had felt since Hannah's final days, surged through him. Not again. Not another loss. Not him. Not Ranger. Outside, the storm howled louder than ever. Inside the cabin, Shadow roared. The sound shook the walls. Ava cried openly, and Ethan knelt beside the dog who had saved his life. More times than he could count. The mountains seemed to hold their breath, because for the first time since arriving on Black Pine Ridge, Ethan Carter truly believed he might lose the one companion who had carried him through the darkest years of his life. And somewhere beyond the storm, high above the valley, snow was already beginning to shift. The mountain itself was waking up. The cabin shook beneath another powerful gust of wind. Snow hammered the walls. The forest outside had disappeared entirely. White darkness swallowed everything. Inside, Ethan Carter knelt beside Ranger. The old German Shepherd struggled to lift his head. Pain clouded his eyes. Yet even now, his attention remained fixed on Ethan. Still protecting. Still working. Still refusing to quit. The sight nearly broke him. "Stay with me, buddy." His voice trembled. Ranger's tail moved once. Barely. But enough. Ava crouched nearby, tears streaking her face. Shadow paced near the shattered wall, agitated by the chaos. The grizzly's powerful muscles rippled beneath her thick winter coat. Every instinct told her danger was closing in, and for once her instincts were right. Outside, voices echoed through the storm. Closer now. Much closer. Victor Hale's men had abandoned intimidation. They were advancing. Ethan forced himself to focus. Emotion could wait. Survival couldn't. He quickly examined Ranger. The injury looked serious, but not immediately fatal. The dog was alive. That was enough. For now. Outside, another voice shouted, "We know you're in there!" The wind carried the words through the broken wall. Ava flinched. Shadow growled deeply. Ethan stood. His body ached. His mind felt raw from the PTSD episode, but years of military training slowly reasserted control. Breathe. Assess. Adapt. Move. He looked toward the mountains beyond the cabin. Visibility remained poor, but something felt wrong. Very wrong. The storm itself had changed. The wind sounded different, deeper, heavier. Then he heard it. A low rumble. Distant. Almost too faint to notice. At first it sounded like thunder. But there were no thunderstorms in January. Not here. Not now. The rumble continued, growing, building. The mountain was speaking. Ethan's eyes widened. Avalanche. The realization hit instantly. High above Black Pine Ridge, weeks of heavy snow had accumulated across unstable slopes. Now the storm, the noise, the movement, everything together had created the perfect conditions. The mountain was about to collapse. Outside, Victor Hale's men remained unaware. Their flashlights moved through the storm, advancing toward the cabin, hunting, searching. Then the rumble grew louder, much louder. Even Ava heard it. "What is that?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was already moving. "Everybody out." Ava froze. "What? Now?" The urgency in his voice eliminated all hesitation. The teenager grabbed her coat. Shadow immediately moved toward the door. The bear sensed the danger before fully understanding it. Ranger struggled to stand. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. The sight stabbed through Ethan's chest. No. The word escaped before he realized it. Not Ranger. Not now. The rumble intensified. Snow drifted from the cabin roof. The floor vibrated. The mountain was no longer warning them. The mountain was breaking. Ethan lifted Ranger. The old dog wasn't light, but adrenaline ignored weight. Years ago, Ethan had carried wounded teammates across battlefields. Tonight, he carried family. The moment they stepped outside, chaos erupted. The sound became enormous, a roar unlike anything human, the sound of an entire mountainside moving, trees snapping, ice breaking, snow accelerating, nature unleashed. Victor Hale's men finally realized what was happening. Flashlights scattered wildly. Voices shouted. Panic replaced confidence. Everyone began running, but avalanches don't care about fear, or power, or plans. They simply come. Shadow roared. The massive grizzly suddenly sprinted uphill, not away, toward them, toward Ethan, toward Ava. The bear stopped beside a narrow ravine partially hidden by snow-covered trees, then turned, looking directly at them, waiting. Ethan understood immediately. She knew a safe route. Instinct. Generations of mountain survival. The bear knew where to go. Follow her. Ava didn't hesitate. Neither did Ethan. They plunged toward the ravine. Snow exploded behind them. The roar became deafening. Trees vanished beneath moving white destruction. The mountain came alive. Shadow led. Ava followed. Ethan carried Ranger. Every step felt impossible. The ravine narrowed sharply. Rock walls rose on both sides, creating a natural shield, a protected channel, a place where the avalanche's full force couldn't reach. The bear had found their escape. Then disaster struck. The ground disappeared beneath Ethan's feet. A hidden pocket of snow collapsed. He stumbled. Ranger slipped from his arms. "Ethan!" Ava screamed. The dog vanished into swirling white. For one horrifying second, Ethan saw nothing. No movement, no Ranger, only chaos. Then the avalanche hit. The world disappeared. White, sound, violence, nature consuming everything. Ethan grabbed Ava and threw both of them against the ravine wall. Shadow positioned herself beside them, massive, steady, protective. Snow surged past, above, around, through. The force felt endless. Minutes passed. Or seconds. Time lost meaning. Eventually the roar faded. The mountain grew quiet. Very quiet. The kind of silence that follows catastrophe. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Snow continued drifting gently from the sky, as if nothing had happened, as if the mountain hadn't just transformed the landscape. Ethan slowly stood, His ears rang. His body hurt. But he was alive. Ava was alive. Shadow was alive. Then reality returned. Ranger. The old seal dropped to his knees, scanning desperately, searching, calling. Ranger. Nothing. Only silence. He climbed through waist-deep snow, ignoring exhaustion, ignoring pain, searching, again, and again, and again. No tracks, no movement, nothing. The avalanche had erased everything. Ava watched helplessly. Tears filled her eyes. Shadow remained strangely still. The bear sat atop a mound of snow overlooking the devastated valley, watching, listening, waiting. Hours seemed to pass. Darkness slowly returned. The storm finally weakened. Moonlight broke through scattered clouds. The destruction became visible. Entire sections of forest had vanished. Trees lay buried. The landscape itself had changed. And Ranger was gone. Ethan stood motionless. His heart felt hollow. The same feeling, the same terrible emptiness, the one he experienced standing beside Hannah's hospital bed. Loss. Pure loss. He couldn't accept it, wouldn't accept it. But the mountain offered no answers, only silence. Ava finally approached, placing a hand on his arm. Ethan. He couldn't speak, couldn't move. Somewhere deep inside, old wounds reopened, not from war, not from PTSD, from love, because loving something always carried risk. And Ranger had been more than a dog, more than a partner, more than a friend. He had been the reason Ethan survived after Hannah died, the reason he kept going, the reason he woke up each morning. Now the mountain had taken him too. High above Black Pine Ridge, beneath cold moonlight and endless snow, silence settled over the wilderness. A grieving veteran stared across a broken valley. A frightened girl stood beside him. A protective grizzly watched from the darkness, and somewhere beneath thousands of tons of snow, a loyal K9 had disappeared. At least, that was what everyone believed. Dawn arrived slowly. Cold gray light spread across the shattered mountainside. The avalanche had transformed Black Pine Ridge into a different world. Entire sections of forest were gone. Snow buried roads, ravines had deepened, new cliffs had appeared where none existed before. Nature had rewritten the landscape overnight. Ethan Carter stood on a ridge overlooking the destruction. He had not slept, not even for a minute. Every hour since the avalanche had been spent searching, calling, listening, hoping, and finding nothing. Ava sat nearby, wrapped in a blanket, silent, heartbroken. Even Shadow seemed different. The grizzly moved more slowly, watching Ethan with an almost painful awareness, as though she understood grief, as though she recognized it. The morning passed in silence. Then noon came. Still nothing. By afternoon, reality began settling into places hope once occupied. Ethan hated himself for it. The possibility, the acceptance, the surrender. All of it felt like betrayal. Ranger had never given up on him. Not once. How could he give up now? So he searched again, and again, and again. The snow reached his waist in places. His hands bled. His legs trembled from exhaustion. Still, he continued. The mountains offered no answers, only silence. Then something changed. At first, Ethan thought it was imagination, a memory, a wish, a ghost. But the sound came again. Faint, very faint. A bark. His head snapped upward. Ava froze. Shadow stood immediately. The sound came again. Far away. Across the valley. A single bark. Then another. Then another. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. Ranger. The word escaped like a prayer. The barking grew louder. Closer. Moving. Ava was already crying. Not from sadness this time. From hope. The sound echoed through the ruined valley. A living sound. A familiar sound. A miracle. Then movement appeared through the trees. A shape. Dark against the snow. Running, stumbling. Running again. The German shepherd emerged from behind a fallen pine. Injured, exhausted, covered in ice and snow, but alive, very much alive. For a moment nobody moved. The sight felt impossible. Then Ethan ran. The old seal crossed the snow faster than he thought possible. Ranger met him halfway. The dog collapsed the instant he reached him. Not from weakness, from relief. Ethan dropped to his knees, wrapping both arms around the shepherd. Years of grief, fear, pain. Everything broke loose at once. "You're okay." His voice cracked. The dog pressed against him, tail wagging weakly, eyes bright. Alive, alive, alive. Ava reached them moments later. Tears streamed down her face. Even Shadow approached quietly, the grizzly stopping several yards away, watching the reunion. The family was whole again. But Ranger hadn't returned alone. Behind him came more people. Rescue crews, search teams, sheriff's deputies. The avalanche had drawn attention from every nearby town, and somehow Ranger had found them. The old military dog had traveled through miles of destroyed wilderness. Injured, alone, determined. Leading help directly to Ethan, exactly as he had been trained to do. Exactly as he had always done. One deputy shook his head in disbelief. "That dog saved every one of you." Ethan looked down at Ranger. The shepherd simply rested beside him. Mission complete. The rescue teams quickly secured the area. Medical personnel examined Ranger. Veterinarians were contacted. Search crews expanded throughout the ridge. And within hours, another breakthrough arrived. The hidden documents, the evidence, the records Ethan discovered beneath the cabin. Authorities reviewed everything, every page, every map, every signature. The truth emerged quickly. Victor Hale's empire was built on decades of fraud, illegal property transfers, forged ownership records, corruption, witness intimidation. The evidence was overwhelming. The avalanche had exposed more than mountains. It had exposed secrets, and those secrets were finally surfacing. Late that evening, a state investigator arrived. An older woman named Margaret Lawson. Sharp eyes, calm voice, the kind of person who noticed details. She spent hours reviewing documents, interviewing Ava, speaking with Ethan. Then she paused while examining an old photograph recovered from the cabin. Something about it caught her attention. "Where did you find this?" Ethan looked closer. The photograph showed a younger woman kneeling beside a large bear enclosure. Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, Montana, years earlier. His breath caught. "Hannah." Margaret looked surprised. "Your wife?" Ethan nodded slowly. The image felt familiar, yet distant. A memory from another lifetime. Margaret studied the photograph again, then another document, then another. Suddenly, her expression changed. "What is it?" She looked at Ethan. "Your wife worked with wildlife rehabilitation programs, didn't she? Before she got sick?" The investigator nodded. "I thought so." She carefully unfolded another file. This one older. Official. Archived. The page contained veterinary records, wildlife recovery reports, photographs, and one image stopped Ethan cold. A younger grizzly bear, scar across the shoulder, torn ear. The same bear. Shadow. The room fell silent. No. The word escaped automatically. Margaret pointed toward the report. 7 years ago, this bear was found injured after a poaching incident. Ethan stared, unable to speak. The investigator continued. The rehabilitation team that treated her included Hannah Carter. Everything seemed to stop. The room. The mountain. Time itself. Shadow, Hannah. Connected. The impossible suddenly became real. Margaret opened another page. Additional photographs. Hannah feeding the recovering bear. Cleaning wounds. Standing beside veterinarians. Smiling. Alive. Happy. Ethan's eyes filled instantly. He hadn't seen some of these pictures before. Hadn't known they existed. The investigator looked toward the forest beyond the window. Animals remember more than people realize. Nobody spoke. Nobody needed to. The realization settled slowly. Shadow hadn't randomly appeared. She hadn't randomly protected Ethan. Years earlier, Hannah had helped save her life. And somehow, somewhere, the bear remembered. The pieces finally fit together. The protection, the trust, the strange connection from the very beginning. Not coincidence. Memory. A debt repaid across years, across grief, across species. Outside, snow drifted gently through moonlight. Shadow stood at the edge of the trees, watching the cabin, watching Ethan. The same way she always had. For the first time, he truly understood why. Not because she belonged to him, not because she was tame, not because she had stopped being wild, but because once upon a time, a kind woman named Hannah had shown mercy, and the bear had never forgotten. Beside him, Ranger slept peacefully for the first time in days. Safe, alive, victorious. The old dog had found his way home. The truth had found its way into the light. And somewhere deep inside Ethan Carter, a wound that had remained open since Hannah's death finally began to heal. Winter slowly loosened its grip on Black Pine Ridge. The change came one day at a time. A little more sunlight. A little less ice. A few patches of earth appearing beneath the snow. The mountains that had seemed harsh and unforgiving, only weeks earlier, now felt alive again. Streams began flowing beneath the frozen crust. Birdsong returned to the forest. The long Montana winter was finally surrendering to spring. For Ethan, the season felt like a second chance. The weeks following the avalanche transformed everything. Victor Hale's empire collapsed faster than anyone expected. The documents hidden beneath the cabin proved impossible to deny. Investigators uncovered decades of fraudulent land transfers, property theft, corruption, witness intimidation. Records that powerful people believed would remain buried forever. They had been wrong. One by one, the truth surfaced. Families who had lost ranches generations earlier received long overdue justice. Ownership disputes were reopened. Land that had been stolen slowly found its way back to rightful hands. The story spread across Montana, then beyond. Not because of the corruption, not even because of Victor Hale's downfall. People became fascinated by something else. A former Navy SEAL, his loyal military dog, and a grizzly bear that had chosen compassion over fear. The story sounded impossible, yet every witness told the same version, the same truth, the same miracle. Ranger became something of a local legend. Veterinarians treated his injuries carefully. The old German shepherd recovered slowly. His muzzle had grown grayer over the years. His movements had become slower. But his spirit remained unchanged. Every morning he still checked the cabin perimeter. Every evening he still positioned himself near Ethan's chair, always watching, always protecting. The same loyal partner he had always been. One afternoon, Ethan sat beside the cabin while Ranger rested nearby in the warm spring sunshine. For the first time in years, peace felt possible. Not perfect peace. The scars remained. The memories remained. PTSD didn't simply disappear. Some nights were still difficult. Some dreams still returned. But now Ethan understood something he hadn't understood before. Healing wasn't forgetting. Healing was learning how to carry the memories without letting them destroy you. Ava understood that lesson too. The frightened teenager who once hid alone in a mountain cave had changed dramatically. The fear in her eyes slowly faded. Confidence replaced it. Laughter returned. Hope returned. With the help of investigators, she was reunited with relatives living in Missoula. Good people. Honest people. People who cared about her. Yet she visited Black Pine Ridge often. The cabin had become more than a shelter. It had become part of her story, part of her survival, part of her family. One Saturday morning, she arrived carrying a small wooden sign. Ethan watched curiously as she hammered it beside the front porch. Black Pine Sanctuary, the words were simple, yet somehow perfect. "What do you think?" she asked. Ethan smiled. "I think it fits." Ranger barked once in approval. Ava laughed. "See? Ranger likes it too." The dog wagged his tail proudly. As spring deepened, visitors occasionally appeared. Veterans, wildlife researchers, families curious about the remarkable story they had heard on the news. Most stayed only briefly. Some brought gifts, others brought questions, but nearly all left with the same feeling: hope. Because the story wasn't really about a bear, or corruption, or hidden documents. It was about second chances, and people seemed hungry for those. One evening, near the end of April, Ethan stood alone beside the stream below the cabin. The setting sun painted the mountains gold, the same mountains where he had once planned to disappear from the world, the same mountains that had given him a reason to stay. He carried Hannah's photograph in his pocket. Not because he couldn't let go, because he no longer needed to. The difference mattered. For the first time since her death, looking at her picture brought warmth instead of pain, gratitude instead of grief, love instead of loss. A sound behind him broke the silence, soft, familiar. Ranger had appeared beside him. The old shepherd stared toward the tree line, watching, focused. Ethan followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing, then movement. A shape emerged from the shadows between the pines. Large, powerful, graceful shadow. The grizzly bear stepped into the fading sunlight. Ethan smiled immediately. Months earlier, he might have felt fear. Now he felt something closer to friendship. The bear paused at the edge of the clearing, watching him, watching Ranger, the same way she always had. But she wasn't alone. Two small shapes appeared behind her. Cubs, young grizzly cubs, curious, playful, healthy. Ethan's breath caught. The sight felt almost unreal. Shadow had become a mother again. The cubs stumbled through the grass behind her, exploring the world with fearless enthusiasm. Ranger sat quietly beside Ethan. Neither moved. Neither spoke. They simply watched. Shadow looked toward the cabin, toward the stream, toward the mountains, then toward Ethan. For a long moment they remained connected by nothing more than distance and understanding. No words. None were necessary. The bear remembered Hannah, Ethan believed that now, not in some magical way, not as a human would remember, but in the way animals remembered kindness, safety, trust. Years earlier, Hannah had helped save her life, and when tragedy struck Ethan's life, Shadow had somehow returned the favor. The circle had closed. The debt had been repaid. The cubs wrestled playfully near their mother. Shadow watched them with calm confidence. A future, a second chance, a new beginning. The symbolism wasn't lost on Ethan. Beside him, Ranger rested his head against his leg. The old dog's eyes remained fixed on the cubs, satisfied, content, mission complete. Eventually, Shadow turned toward the forest. The cubs followed. Before disappearing into the trees, she paused one final time. The evening sunlight illuminated her scarred shoulder, the torn ear, the same bear that had once been frightened and wounded, the same bear who had protected strangers, the same bear connected forever to Hannah's memory. Then she vanished into the wilderness. The cubs followed, and just like that, they were gone. The forest swallowed them. The mountains reclaimed them. Exactly as it should be. Ethan stood silently for several moments, watching the empty tree line, listening to the wind, feeling something inside him settle at last. Not sadness, not grief, peace, true peace, the kind he thought he had lost forever. As the sun disappeared behind the Bitterroot Mountains, Black Pine Ridge glowed beneath a golden sky. A former Navy SEAL stood beside his loyal K-9. A new community waited below in the valley. A future waited ahead. And somewhere beyond the forest, a mother bear guided her cubs through a world filled with danger and possibility. Life moved forward, not because pain disappeared, but because love found a new way to remain. And under the warm light of a Montana spring sunset, Ethan Carter finally understood the lesson the mountains had been trying to teach him all along. The deepest wounds are not healed by forgetting. They heal when love finds a way to return. If you believe loyalty, courage, and kindness still matter in this world, comment yes below and tell us where you're watching from. Sometimes the people, or animals, we help come back into our lives when we need them most. And if stories about justice, perseverance, and second chances mean something to you, be sure to subscribe and join us for the next unforgettable journey.